Chapter 12, the annelids, earthworms. Um, so annelids are a little more than just earthworms. They're also the polychaetes, which are the clamworms, and leeches as well, which are actually closely related, more closely related to earthworms than they are to clamworms. This group first introduces the term metamerism, which is not exactly interchangeable with, but very close to segmentation. That means that the body parts are segmented and include many internal organ systems. So it's a series of repeated parts, so repeating body systems. That means if we slice up an earthworm, you will find in each slice repeated body systems. So you'll find digestive system in those segments, and you'll find nervous system in each of those segments. Whereas prior to this, we didn't see that. It means that many systems can function together, and that you're not at risk of losing an entire system if you're injured. It also means that you can have specialized body regions for specific functions. It makes the whole system function as a unit better because they're talking to each other. So this is what we see. Well, we see each of the three spaces, the mesoderm, the endoderm, and the ectoderm, all together. And then we get a coelom in the center. So the polychaetes, most of these are marine. As I mentioned, these are the clamworms. They are the largest annelid class, so they are what most people would call the most successful group. They have some very unique structures. They do have parapodia, which are these extensions of the body wall that function largely in locomotion and are extremely successful at locomotion. On each of the parapodia, you will find setae, S-E-T-A-E, setae. Those also assist in locomotion, and you will find they are significant for classification. Then what we need to go to is the head. Ooh, didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Then we need to talk about our head parts, specifically the prostomium and the parapodium. The prostomium is going to be the first head structure, and the parapodium is going to be just off the body. So prostomium is the lobe projecting dorsally and anteriorly from the mouth. Peristomium is the first body segment towards the mouth. Okay. These guys, a lot of them are aquatic. The feeding and digestion in this group, it's a straight tube through the body, connected. They may have a proboscis, which may be everted similar to a planarian, but not necessarily. They have a crop and a gizzard and an intestine. Gas exchange is still working via diffusion. The circulatory system is closed, however, as you see here. You see the capillaries extending into a parapodium. The blood does have respiratory pigments, and you will find a ventral aorta and a dorsal aorta, both of which are contractile. You will find a ganglia, both suprapharyngeal and subpharyngeal, a ventral nerve cord, and ganglia in isolated segments. Those ganglia control sensory and motor functions involved with feeding and locomotion. There's a giant fiber running through them here. Those are for escape responses. Okay, they do have eyes, 2 to 4 pairs on the prostomium. The nuchal organs, which are chemosensory, are in the head. They also have statocysts for balance and tactile receptors all over the body. Excretion. Because they're largely aquatic, they can excrete ammonia, and their osmoregulation is done so with protonephridia, and they also in the primitive polychaetes, but metanephridia in most of the polychaetes. So they have evolved a more sophisticated version. That's just the metanephridia. They do regenerate well. That means that they are capable of asexual reproduction via budding and fission, but they're also capable of sexual reproduction. So gametes are thrown into the coelom to mature. They're released via the nephridium and the nephridiopore. Occasionally, they may just completely rupture the body wall. What's most common, however, is epitoky. Epitoky is very unusual. At breeding, the worm actually breaks into the anterior and the posterior half. The posterior becomes the epitoke, and within that epitoke, gonads develop, and that epitoke actually joins with other epitokes, and the epitoke ruptures and gametes are released. Clitellata. This includes earthworms and leeches. It's divided into 2 subclasses, one for earthworms, one for leeches. The Oligochaeta are the earthworms. They have very small setae. They lack parapodia, so no little feet. And what's really significant is they have a clitellum and they keep it year-round. That clitellum is this broad band that you see on worms, and it's used for secreting mucus during copulation. So it secretes mucus, and then as that mucus sheath sloughs off the end of the worm, and it creates a cocoon for eggs to develop into tiny worms. Locomotion is a combination of both circular and longitudinal muscles. So in this case, you have circular muscles here contracted with the setae drawn in. This worm is obviously in a burrow. And then we see setae protruded with longitudinal muscles contracted and pushing against the wall of the burrow. So it's a combination of muscles. Okay. Feeding and digestive system, they're scavengers. They tend to eat decaying vegetation. They use diffusion for gas exchange. They have a closed circulatory system and a dorsal and a ventral aorta, which are both contractile, similar to the polychaetes. They okay. They're also similar to their nervous system's very similar. They do not have well-developed eyes. But if you keep in mind they live underground, so there's really not much sense to it. They don't respond to light well. They do, however, have well-developed chemo and mechanical receptors. They also use metanephridia for excretion, so that is well-developed. When they reproduce, there is mutual exchange of sperm. So this is what happens. There is release of sperm from seminal vesicles that is received into seminal receptacles from both worms. So sperm are coming from here and going into receptacles, and sperm are coming from here and going into receptacles. So both worms receive sperm and both worms release eggs that are put into a cocoon, which is formed by the clitellum. Those eggs are fertilized within the cocoon, and then the cocoon is left. Next subclass, the Herudia. These are leeches. Most of them are freshwater. They do not have parapodia. They do not have setae, most of them. Their body is subdivided into little annuli. They do have suckers, both anteriorly and posteriorly. So here they are. They have they're very well developed muscularly. They use circular muscles to latch onto the substrate and then propel themselves forward where they latch on again. And that is how they move. They're predators of invertebrates and vertebrates, frequently having a proboscis and producing an anticoagulant, so the blood that they're feeding on does not clot. Gas exchange is by diffusion, still through the body wall. Circulation, similar to the oligochaetes. So I'm not going to go into that again. Nervous system and sensory functions, also similar to other annelids, except that the ventral nerves cords unfused. They do have something called pigment cup photoreceptors. That just means that they are highly receptive to light. They also are sensitive to temperature changes if they feed on mammals. They also have metanephridia. And finally, they are monoecious, sexual reproduction only, and the clitellum is present, but only when they're breeding. And they actually have a penis to transfer sperm.